Welcome back to the Grow Your Nutrition Business podcast. At Healthy Steps Nutrition, we believe something as fundamental as nutrition shouldn't be complicated, which is why we focus on a simple, habit-based approach. We help gym owners and coaches build successful nutrition programs without reinventing the wheel. I'm your host, Nicole Coyne, registered dietitian and founder at Healthy Steps Nutrition, CrossFit HSN, and HSN Mentoring. I'm also the author of the Basics of Nutrition Coaching standalone course, a CrossFit preferred nutrition course. I'm going to teach you how to take one step at a time to build a successful nutrition program where you finally feel confident when helping your members and communities with nutrition. Today, I'm talking with Karen Thomson all about sugar addiction and the role of chronic disease. Recently, we hosted a panel discussion for gym owners, and I wanted to continue the conversation on this podcast. Did you know that heart disease, diabetes, and cancer are the leading causes of death in the United States? 70% of deaths are caused by chronic disease. What's crazy is 40% of our population has 2 or more chronic diseases. 60% has at least one. Chronic disease is defined as a condition that requires ongoing medical attention for over a year. Chronic disease is the leading driver of the nation's $3.5 trillion healthcare costs. And according to the World Health Organization, 80% of chronic disease can be prevented. Yep, 80% of chronic disease can be prevented. One of the most disturbing statistics that I've found is that 40% of normal weight people are metabolically sick. Just because you're a healthy weight doesn't mean that you can eat whatever you want and you shouldn't be caring about chronic disease. Now, let's talk about prevention. There are 3 main things that you can do to prevent chronic disease. The first one is physical activity. Second one, eat a healthy diet. And the third one, don't use tobacco. Today, we are focusing on one piece of an unhealthy diet, and it's sugar consumption and why we are so addicted to sugar. We'll get to this episode just after this message. Are you looking for healthy recipes, or are you looking for healthy recipes for your nutrition clients? Healthy Steps Nutrition released a cookbook available on Amazon that has low sugar, healthy recipes the entire family will love. And we've decided to donate all of the money from the first 1,000 copies sold to feed local families in South Florida this holiday season. You can head over to Amazon and type in Cookbook Aucoin, my last name, Aucoin. It will pop right up. Or click the link in the show notes and we will link it there for you. Enjoy this episode. Welcome back to the Grow Your Nutrition Business podcast. Today, I'm so excited to have Karen with us. Karen, thank you for joining me. This is the second time in 2 weeks that we are talking about chronic disease and disease prevention and sugar.
Yep, I'm very excited. Thank you so much for having me.
So you have such a journey yourself with and a passion for nutrition, and you talked about it so much on the chronic disease webinar. So I want to talk about the chronic disease webinar first and some of the biggest takeaways, and then we can dive into sugar and sugar addiction. So we hosted this chronic disease webinar with Julie Fouché, Dr. Shaka Gillen, and you and I, and we really talked about what is chronic disease and some of the crazy statistics about chronic disease. How does nutrition play a role? How does fitness play a role? How does stress play a role? And most importantly, what affiliate owners can do. And the feedback was absolutely amazing. So first, I want to say thank you for jumping on that.
Thank you for organizing it. What a great idea. And what a great group of women that you got together as well to talk about it.
You know, we're all passionate about helping people and achieving optimal health, not through diets or pills or anything, but just focusing on real food. And it was so fun to just get different perspectives. And you wrote a book on the topic that we're specifically talking about today, and sugar addiction.
It feels like another lifetime, but yes, I did write a book on sugar addiction, and it still is something that I firmly believe in and think that we need to create so much awareness about. And it's the perfect time of the year. Halloween is tomorrow, and it's like, when is it more relevant than right now?
The holidays historically are the toughest time to stay away from sugar because everything has sugar in it. So by the time, we're listening to this podcast, we really need to be just understanding and aware of what sugar does in the body and how we get addicted to it. And honestly, right after the podcast, I said, you described sugar addiction in such an easy way for people to understand. You have to come on the podcast and describe it again. And people just don't understand. When you do the CrossFit level 1, they talk about the average American consumes over 150 pounds of sugar per year. And we break that down, it's over 3 pounds of sugar per week, which is way more than the American Heart Association recommends. But the truth is, we don't even know where the sugar is coming from because it's literally in everything.
Right. Absolutely. I posted some images on my Instagram yesterday showing how many teaspoons of sugar, and it was depicted in like blocks of sugar, is contained in various drinks that we feed our kids every single day. And I mean, as you know, there are various recommendations, but the most general one is that no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar for kids per day. And a glass of orange juice has like 9 in it. And like, there's no way that people are only feeding their kids like 1 glass of orange juice. Like, there's so much more that we're feeding our kids every single day. And the amount of added sugar that we're feeding them is killing us and them. And it's going to lead to endless suffering and chronic disease in the future.
Parents don't realize that what they're feeding their kids is directly impacting the future of their life.
Yeah.
Research shows if you are overweight at the age of 3, the percentage of you being overweight at the age of 30 is super high. And then you go up to the age of like 16, it's like 80% chance that you're going to be overweight at the age of 30 if you're overweight at 16. And
right.
I truthfully do not believe any parent would purposely set their kid up for failure. And that's where like my passion comes down to is there's so much misinformation out there and marketing. There's so much money spent in marketing that's confusing parents to think that what they're feeding their child is good because it has 100% juice on the front or whole grains on the front and doesn't talk about how much added sugar is in things.
Right. I mean, the marketing campaigns are just brilliant because it really takes our focus away from really looking what's in the product and, just looking at these perceived benefits, which aren't even benefits. They're not real.
At the very simplistic terms and ideas, if you focus on whole foods first, that's going to be a great first step for what you should be feeding your children. If it's going through a food processor and they have to add chemicals into it to make it shelf stable or make it taste better, probably, not the best option for your kids. We actually have a cookbook that is now released, a kids cookbook. I'm so excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But let's talk about food addiction. One of the things that you mentioned on the podcast was companies combining sugar, salt, and fat together, and it just is a recipe for disaster with us wanting more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's these foods are chemically engineered to stimulate our bliss point, and the research, these engineers have found that our bliss point is the point that is stimulated in our brain that leads us, it doesn't satiate us, but it releases dopamine in a way that it leaves us wanting more and more and more. It doesn't tell our brain we're full, but it leaves us craving more and more, and we want more and more in order to feel the same way. And that's why we can sit and eat like a whole bag of Oreos and despite the amount of calories and just never feel full and just keep wanting more. So a lot of our food in this toxic food environment that we live in has been chemically engineered to make us addicted to it.
And people don't realize it.
Yeah.
They don't realize that this is what's happening beyond just the food that they're eating. And, the more sugar you have, the more you crave, right? And when you're not used to having sugar, you have something with a little bit of sugar, it tastes so, so sweet versus someone that's having a bunch of sugar, it tastes just normal.
Right. Absolutely. And I think the biggest problem is that on the outside, it doesn't seem that sugar is it seems sugar is pretty harmless. Like people are like, oh, what do you mean? My kids have sugar. Like you're being so difficult or you're just overly sensitive. And I'm like, you know what? But on the inside, it's killing us. We have to look at, what it does to our body to our metabolism, to the chronic disease, the stuff that you were talking about later in life, for us to really understand the impact that short, having it in our mouth and feeling great for like a couple of minutes, the long-term effect is just so bad.
One of the statistics that we talked about during that chronic disease webinar is 40% of normal weight people are metabolically sick. So, and something Julie Fouché was talking about was, these issues, chronic disease issues, did not happen overnight. Like, they happened from daily actions over a extended period of time, years and years, which comes back to what we're talking about right now. What are you fueling your body with?
Absolutely. You know what? That makes me think so much about that, like CrossFit and injury thing as well. So my shoulder is so messed up, and I can easily blame it on CrossFit, right? But the truth is that I played water polo almost at a professional level when I was young. And it literally, throwing that ball really hard, like, was terrible for my shoulder without doing any exercise to train it or, do anything. And my shoulder injury is because of what I did when I was a teenager, not because of what I'm doing right now. And I feel like the food thing's exactly the same. That stuff that we're doing when we're young really only manifests in our health at a much later age and stage. And so we're feeling the effects of, the chronic disease stuff. It manifests over time. And so what we're feeding our kids today is only going to show up later. And what we're putting, us as adults, what we're putting in our bodies right now will also show up later. And also the other thing is, like, if we just eat healthy for a week or, change our behavior now, it doesn't mean that we're going to immediately reap the benefits as well. Like, this is a longer process and it's not always visible.
It takes time. It takes so much time. And
yeah,
the problem is we live in this microwave society where we expect if we change everything today, we're going to see results tomorrow. And that's not in reality what happens. If you're trying to change too much at one time, you're not going to have sustainable results. It's not going to be possible for you to keep those same things going forever. And I think that's why so many people who do nutrition challenges or just try to change like New Year's resolutions, right? Like, they try to change everything at one time and then they fail.
Right. Absolutely. It's really, really hard. And especially with like sugar addiction, it's because it's such a behavioral, emotional, psychological, there's so many components to it that it's really hard to just stop it or quit it or not go back to it unless you have a real understanding of what it is and why you're behaving in the way that you do around sugar.
So many people use food for comfort and stress, and goodness, we've been living in a stressful season, and you go to those salty or sweet things because it's stressful, right? You're stressed and it helps you cope. As you were talking about before, those dopamine releases give you instant gratification to make you feel better. And then soon after, you've got that sugar high, then sugar low, and then you're not feeling great again. And instead, we need to, as nutrition coaches, find ways to help clients manage stress beyond just food. We have to identify those triggers and figure out what is going on around the client that's causing them to have these sugar addictions and going overboard.
Absolutely. I think that's key in addressing the behavioral aspect of any type of addiction, but also, with food and sugar addiction, which, sugar is so much more acceptable. So we kind of like sweep it under the rug because it's available. It's everywhere. These big food companies have huge marketing and advertising campaigns behind it. And it's so much harder to avoid. But I don't think we can underplay the devastating effects any type of behavior has on our health in every way.
I used to travel around to different CrossFit gyms and do nutrition seminars, and it was guaranteed that I would always get a question about, what about raw sugar versus agave versus honey versus whatever kind of sugar you want to, put under this, big umbrella. But isn't that healthier for you? Isn't agave better for you than like table sugar?
Right. Any justification to have some kind of sugar where, regardless of the form that it comes in. I mean, there's like great infographic that shows you like the 50 plus different names for sugar, and essentially the way our body digests it doesn't really matter what form we put it in our mouths in. It's about what happens once it enters our body. And so obviously the brain thing with the dopamine response, the reward circuit associated with addictive behavior, how we release the dopamine and we feel this high, and how we have to have more and more of the substance to have the same feeling over and over. And that's the definition of addiction and how it manifests, the addictive cycle. And so that's super interesting. And then I think, just looking at the physiology, like what happens when sugar enters my mouth and it goes into my body. I've been doing this CGM experience with levels, and monitoring my glucose and testing different foods and seeing what happens when sugar enters my body. And it's insane. Even fructose, like the fruit that I eat, has a much higher spike than so many other things. So it's really interesting.
So at what you just said in one sentence, it doesn't really matter what type of sugar you're eating, you're still going to have similar responses. So while it may be called healthier form or more natural form of sugar, you're still having that insulin spike. You're still having those dopamine rushes to make you feel good. You're still having that inflammatory response in your body. Not saying you can never have sugar ever in your life, but you just need to be mindful and have small amounts instead of going way overboard. Like if you want a cookie, have a cookie. Don't eat an entire box of cookies in one sitting every single day, right?
Well, the thing is like with me and my own sugar and fruit addiction, 1 is too many and 1,000 is never enough. Like if I open a box of cookies, like there's no chance that I'm just going to walk away after one cookie. Like I physically cannot do that. I can't. I've tested it thousands of times. There is just no way that I can do that. And so for me, I have to realize and accept and acknowledge that and see how I can work with it. Now, with my CGM stuff and testing, fructose is really bad for me. Glucose is not as bad, does for my blood sugar. And it's weird that different types of sugars have different responses. But I have found that if I combine it with protein and fat, that spike is definitely blunted. And if I have it after exercise, it also doesn't have such a huge impact. So there's so many other factors that go into managing blood glucose than just the food that we eat. And what I'm trying to say is it's super important for each of us to self-experiment, learn about our bodies in order to figure out what's best for us.
Could not agree more. My husband and I watch your Instagram stories all the time, and we post in there. I'll send you messages. Hey, try this tomorrow. Hey, try this. Because it's so fascinating to us. We actually ordered the same machine. So we're going to be having this continuous glucose monitoring going on. And my husband's dad actually has diabetes. So we are going to be doing it with him around Thanksgiving to see if we eat the same thing, all three of us for breakfast, what's happening to my blood sugar versus Jason's versus his dad's, who is on insulin and is sick. So it's going to be super fascinating.
Wow.
But why I'm saying this is most people have no idea what's going on the inside of their body. So, one thing that you said to me last week that I thought was super interesting, wild blueberries versus regular blueberries had a different response in your blood sugar.
Totally. I mean, it's bizarre, but if you think about it, like if we go into grocery stores, and I know in Whole Foods once I was like, oh my gosh, candy floss apples. And these apples had been engineered to taste like candy floss. So most of the fruits I think that we find in grocery stores, a lot of them have been engineered to be sweeter. Like none of the stuff that we're eating is what it used to be. And so we need to bear that in mind that, often the fruit that we're eating isn't necessarily the fruit that we used to eat. And also the fruit that we used to eat, yes, we evolved like eating fruit, but actually fruit was only available, during summer months or like during specific times. And then, or like just before we would go into whatever hibernation and there wouldn't be abundant food, and we would eat a lot of fruit so that we could put on weight that would sustain us through the times where there was an abundant amount of fruit. And so I think it's so important to put it into context that we didn't evolve from having everything available to us 24/7. We had seasons and we had stuff that was available seasonally. And so we couldn't just go to the supermarket and have whatever we wanted whenever we wanted it. And, I'm from South Africa originally, and moving to the US was such an eye-opener. I could not believe what you guys have available, like 24/7, 365. It's crazy. Even the fact that your stores are open 24/7, like Walmart and those places, like blew my mind. And then the variety that you could get, it was crazy. And then the amount of packaged and processed food, that was just eye-opening. It's really hard to be healthy in America.
Because you're tricked by so many things. You think you're eating healthy food, but you're really not, because companies spend a lot of money figuring out what causes people to buy. Why do you think that all these sugary cereals have whole grains plastered on the front of them so big? Because parents are like, oh, great, it has whole grains, not looking at the nutrition facts label. Oh, there's 12 grams of sugar in 1 cup of cereal that I'm giving my kids, and I usually give them 2 cups, 24 grams of sugar. Now they've gone over on the amount of sugar that's recommended for the day in one meal option, right?
Absolutely. It's so sad. I mean, my kids don't eat cereal, and it's not because I'm a fantastic mother. It's just because we didn't grow up with those options.
It takes intentionality to empower your kids to make healthy food choices right from the beginning. I mean, our kids know healthy foods and they understand, and, they get it treats, of course. Absolutely. We get treats once in a while. My husband loves making brownies, and they'll make them in the little mini things, but that's not happening every single day. Food addiction starts from kids too. It's not just a problem with adults. It really is with kids too. I remember working with a pediatric client who was overweight. His parents were both obese. I went into the pantry at their house, and he had every single flavor of Pop-Tarts. It looked like Publix Pop-Tart section. Those like pastry things with like the...
I have to tell you, I know what they look like, but I've never had one.
You're not missing out on anything. So I look at it and I'm like, okay, next week we're going to take one of these boxes and we're going to throw it away. One of the 12 boxes. So the next week I come, I'm like, all right, well, it's time. We're going to start like slowly organizing the pantry to have healthier foods. The kid literally punched me in the stomach, and the parents did not do anything about it. I'm like,
I don't mean to laugh, but that's really crazy.
Your 8-year-old child is addicted to sugar, and it's not because they're going to the store and getting it. It's because you are enabling them to have that all the time. And, obviously as a nutrition coach, you can't be that stern about it. You have to help parents understand why it's important for their kids to eat healthy foods and, the detrimental effects of sugar addiction. But I mean, this is a serious topic. This is an important topic that we all need to be more aware of. One of the things you mentioned before with the continuous glucose monitoring is that if you pair protein and fat with carbohydrates, your blood sugar doesn't go up as much. It's because fat slows down digestion, right? So it's just not getting digested, not going into your blood as fast. Protein in the same way. So when we're having carbohydrates, we want to have protein and fat with them. So it helps to stabilize our blood sugar. This is like rule 101 with diabetic patients. You teach them how to pair their foods together so that they don't have all these blood sugar spikes and lows. It helps to stabilize it. But that's an important piece of the puzzle. What other things have you learned from the continuous glucose monitoring? I'm curious.
Just other behavioral stuff. I'm very into meditation, and my spiritual life has become so much more important to me over the last 16 years, but like more so the older I'm getting, and not that I'm ancient. So meditation and prayer and just like those kind of behavioral stuff, like what that does to my blood sugar, which is super interesting, because if I sit down and I just breathe and I meditate, my blood sugar comes right down.
Wow.
It's quite a beautiful thing to see how something so out there, it can have such a profound effect on my physiology. And then also exercise. Like when I CrossFit and it's really high intensity, like my blood sugar spikes pretty high, but it comes down really, really quickly. And then if I eat food after that, even if it is higher in sugar and there is a spike, it comes down and normalizes really quickly as well, which is super interesting, where if I wasn't working out, it would spike and then drop really low and then stabilize. So the spike up and down would be extreme before it came to settle again. But I'm lucky because my body does it pretty easily. I'm metabolically quite flexible, I found. Sugar I am very sensitive to sugar, refined carbs, and even vegetable carbs and fruit carbs, as I've spoken about. But I'm lucky that because I do choose to lead a healthy lifestyle, I have been able to adapt more to things in a good way.
Well, that's amazing. I didn't realize that your blood sugar would be that nimble when doing meditation and different things. So that is really interesting to me. And yeah,
Yeah, you should try it because I think it's once again such an individual thing, but it was like eye-opening to me.
that's super interesting. And we know, stress causes your blood sugar to go up a little bit. So when you're in a stressful environment with a high intensity exercise, of course, your blood sugar is going to go up a little bit. And then when you eat after exercise, this is a good point for all of our listeners right now. It's not going to go up as high as if you ate something at another part of the day when you weren't exercising right before. So that's super, super interesting.
And wait, with the other thing that the other thing that I want to say is I went out and we had like a ton of sushi and only protein sushi. It was super interesting. My blood sugar spiked so high from eating the protein. And I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know if it's the soya sauce or some kind of, one of the, I don't know, something that they put in there. There was no rice though. But for some reason, something in that protein only, what I thought was protein only, spiked my blood sugar in a huge way.
That's interesting. And you didn't put any like eel sauce or anything like that in there?
It could have been because they were ready-made rolls, and even though they didn't contain rice, they definitely contained other stuff.
Yeah. There must have been like eel sauce or, some of those other sauces are loaded with sugar, right?
Yeah. And the other thing was like we had some pickled cucumber, which also it seemed only like cucumber that had been pickled. But I think the sugar content in there must have been quite high.
That's interesting. And again, you would have never known if you didn't have that continuous glucose monitor on. And that's how people are tricked, right? Like they don't realize they're eating sugar.
Right. And I thought it was super healthy. Super healthy. I was having like all the best fats, and it was fish and it was lean, and I was like, this is so good, I'm being amazing. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And then I had ice cream after that, and because my blood sugar had spiked so much, it just had like a little spike afterwards from the ice cream. I'm not saying eat ice cream after sushi, but it was just interesting to see.
So you had some ice cream.
Yes, I love ice cream.
Having a little treat once in a while is totally, totally fine. I don't think anyone would tell you that you can never have anything. Like that's not a lifestyle. That's not realistic long term. I'm sure you've seen all of this diet culture, canceled diet culture, like all these, people out there that are shaming if you are talking about what we're talking about now. And our philosophy is eat whole foods, focus on one step at a time, focus on a positive relationship with food. And, it's important to understand what you're eating and how it affects your body.
Totally. Super, super important. And something that we can't really, get away from. And I think the most important thing about this is that it's our responsibility. And if we are constantly looking to outsource our health, like we're never going to get better. And so one of the biggest things is prepping and cooking food at home. Like the only way I'm going to know what's in my food is if I actually have full control over where it's made, how it's made. And then, the most positive and beautiful aspect of that is that we're bringing back the family system. We're bringing back like setting the table for dinner, saying grace before dinner, like stuff that I grew up doing that I kind of forgot about because life got so busy. And I'm really coming back to that point again, where eating together is a celebration, not just because of the food, but because the company we keep, and creating those like really beautiful, magical family moments. And, even if you don't have kids or a family, it's, just creating that space for yourself to honor and nurture and nourish like what's important.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think if COVID did anything, it caused us to slow down and really have that time to spend with our families. And, getting kids in the kitchen at a young age is a really awesome idea. Help them understand why you eat certain foods, how to prep certain foods, what things taste like when you add different seasonings, and ask them to talk to you about it. It's really fun. And, then when kids are in the kitchen, when they're involved in the kitchen, they're more likely to eat new foods.
Yes. and even know where the foods come from. Like, I can't tell you how many kids I've spoken with. They're like, I'm like, where does broccoli come from? And they're like, the supermarket. Like, okay.
Well, actually,
Let's grow some.
it comes from somewhere before the supermarket. Let's talk about that. I think it's so important because this isn't just you. This is, passing on healthy habits generation and generation, and teaching kids the importance of health and food from a young age. So, as a parent, I think you have to set an example, and it starts with you. Like, what are you eating? Doing a self-assessment. As a nutrition coach, you need to be practicing what you preach. A lot of gym owners and nutrition coaches are the ones that listen to this podcast. And, you have to practice what you preach. You have to understand what sugar does in the body. What are some things that you've been tricked by, right? I mean, my husband.
Oh, that's the best question. Oh my gosh. Do you know, sorry. Okay, finish about the husband because I'll remember that.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh my gosh. Do you know what the biggest trickery has been? Are these like keto, sugar-free foods? So there's one brand. I don't necessarily want to shame the brand because I think that the story behind it is really beautiful, and I don't think the intention was to trick anyone. But there are these sugar-free sweets, and they claim to have no effect on the blood sugar. And I ate them. Oh my gosh, the spike was so intense. I'd been feeding my kids these sweets because it has no refined sugar in it. The ingredients are a lot healthier, and I was absolutely horrified to see that I'd been feeding my kids healthy sweets that essentially had probably a worse, response to my blood sugar than normal gummies would have.
That's something that's really important. And I mean, going to like diet sodas too, right? Like,
yes.
I was just listening to the radio yesterday, and they were talking about how diet soda increases your BMI by the same as regular soda. So have the regular soda if you're going to have one. And the thing is it's people are addicted to sugar and sugar sweeteners, like going back to what we've been talking about this whole time. So if you're having those artificial sweeteners, you're still going to get addicted to that because you're addicted to the sweet flavor.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the thing. There was a study done, I don't remember by who, but it just showed that the brain can't really tell the difference between real sugar and sweeteners. So it still has the same effect, like where we are left craving for more, and we still do get a dopamine response, which will be stunted with the more we have. And so we're constantly wanting more and more. And I know for myself, like if I can't necessarily do sweeteners at all because it just makes me crave sugar, that sweet taste.
The more you have, the more you crave. And, we've all been tricked by sugar hidden in healthy foods. Jason, my husband, got an oatmeal the other day, and it was like protein oatmeal and this thing. And then I look in the back, and it's like the second ingredient is sugar. And it had like 12 grams of added sugar in there. I'm like, there's 3 teaspoons of sugar in this one packet of oatmeal. And we don't need that. But you think you're doing the right thing because it's oatmeal, it's healthy. Or yogurt. Like I actually shared the post you were referring to earlier with the sugar cubes next to it. And the Dannon yogurt was like a ton of sugar added to it. But parents think that yogurt is healthy. And usually if you get like a plain yogurt, the difference in taste between plain yogurt and these sugary sweetened ones is night and day.
Totally. Well, I think the big thing is that when we started vilifying fat like a while ago, fat was removed from the food, and it tasted really horrible without fat because fat really makes things really palatable. And so something had to be done to make those foods palatable. And what did they do? They added sugar. And that's why so many of our dairy products and yogurts and things are, the low fat ones always have added sugar because otherwise it tastes horrible.
Yeah. And then we've come to realize that fat's not as bad as we originally thought it was.
Yeah.
And you can actually have fat regularly throughout the day. You need to be mindful because it's the most calorically dense macronutrient. But having fat is a good thing, right? I mean, we all need some fat. So if you're listening to this podcast, my recommendation, my one action step for you is to take an inventory of what you're eating for an entire week. Look at how much added sugar that you're eating. Turn around the label on every single food and see how much sugar is added in the foods that you're eating on a daily basis. I bet you will be surprised by something that had added sugar that you didn't realize.
Absolutely. Or just reading labels, like going to the supermarket and being like, wow, okay, let me check how many teaspoons of sugar this food has. And also realizing just which foods have sugar, like stuff that you would never even guess that's been processed or it's used as a preservative in the food. It's so interesting.
At the end of the day, nutrition, sugar addiction, and consumption of crappy food is the first step, which is causing people to have all of these chronic disease issues. And this isn't something that only happens to super sick people. I mean, 60% of people in the US have at least one chronic disease, 40% have two or more. And chronic disease is defined as a disease, a condition that someone's had for a year or longer that affects their daily living. So, it affects so many more people than we even realize. And this is something that needs to be talked about more. So Karen, thank you for all that you do.
Yay!
I appreciate
Thank you. You're amazing. And I just love what you do. And I love how you do it. And that you're always just full of love and wanting to spread the health message. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Yay!
Love talking about sugar addiction. We will continue this conversation, and I will definitely link the chronic disease panel webinar that we did, which was so much fun, below this podcast. So check it out. Cutting sugar out of your diet can be hard. Many people actually go through withdrawal symptoms when they do cut out sugar. But the first step you need to do is just assess. How much sugar are you having throughout the day? Where is it coming from? How much sugar are your kids having? What hidden sources of sugar are in your kitchen, like sauces and packaged foods? With Thanksgiving right around the corner, a day filled with delicious treats, I challenge you to be a little bit more mindful this year to how much sugar you are having. If you want a treat, have it, then move on. I know I will be having a small piece of pumpkin pie, but it's not going to stay around for a week, and I'm not going to have multiple pieces. I'm just going to have one little piece. Most of us never really know how our body is designed to feel. We don't realize that by eating something, we are actually causing our body to have an inflammatory response because we don't feel what's going on the inside. We don't eat something and then check how our body is reacting. In fact, the only people that usually track how your body is reacting to food are the people that are already struggling with chronic disease, diabetes. Today, continuous glucose monitoring systems, also known as CGM, are widely available. In fact, my husband and I, Jason, have decided to do a little experiment and wear a continuous glucose monitoring system this Thanksgiving to see what is going on the inside of our bodies this week. Jason's dad will be doing it with us, and he has type 2 diabetes, so it's going to be interesting to see when all three of us eat the exact same thing, what's going on the inside. You can follow along by following me on Instagram, Nicole_RD_HSN. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. This is such an important topic when we're working with clients because so many people are addicted to sugar and they have no idea where it's coming from. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please don't forget to rate our podcast, leave a comment and a review. If you do, take a screenshot and send it to podcast@healthystepsnutrition.com, and we will send you over a starter guide and bundle to help you save time and not reinvent the wheel when it comes to building a nutrition program. Happy Thanksgiving.